Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Aldebaran Resources Live Summit today, hosted by Six. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker, CEO and Director, John E. Black. John's going to take us through a company presentation, and afterwards we will be accepting questions live. So as a reminder, feel free to submit questions at any time using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the screen. We're going to try to get to as many as we can after the presentation is over. And as always, this is being recorded and available to watch afterwards on six.com. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, John, to kick it off.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dasha and Romeo and the team at Six for setting this up for us. It's a good opportunity for us just to give a quick update to everyone. We recently announced some new drill results last week, and we're in pretty turbulent market times right now. So we thought it'd be a good chance just to give a little bit more detail about where we're at with the drilling program, what we anticipate we'll be able to complete by the end of the program here in another month or so, and some idea on the catalyst coming forward so everybody gets an idea of what to be looking out for on the project as we move forward. I'm actually calling from Vancouver. It's the first time I've been here in a couple of years. So we're up here for the Vancouver Resource Investor Conference, the VRIC conference, which will be on tomorrow and the next day. And Aldebaran will have a booth at booth 908. For those of you in Vancouver, please stop by and we can catch up in more detail there. So as always, need to remind you that we are a publicly traded company and the appropriate forward-looking statements apply. Thought I'd start off with just a reminder. Many of you on the call will know a fair amount about us, but for those of you that might be new to the company, and just as a good reminder, some of the key points on why to invest in Aldebaran. Really, in the space we're in right now, it's fundamental to realize that quality copper projects are critical for the green energy revolution. There's a shortage of projects, of major copper projects. There's an increasing demand for copper, and our industry as a whole is just not very good at delivering projects in sufficient numbers or quickly enough to keep up with that. So despite some uncertainty in the market right now, a little bit of a dip in the copper price, the long-term forecast for copper looks fantastic, and projects like these are really, really nice to have your hands on going into what will undoubtedly be a copper boom as we come out of this little bump in the road on the markets now. Our management team has a record of selling copper projects to major minings. This is our strategy and what we specifically set ourselves up to do. The Altar project already has a substantial resource with potential to grow. So we have a large deposit already. We're exploring to see if there are additional portions of it that add to that or perhaps become the starter points for it. And then once we know what we have all together, we'll be able to cast this into a PEA and move forward. And I think this will be positioned as an attractive opportunity for a major to take over at some point. Increasingly, it's important that we're located in San Juan, Argentina. Argentina used to be a place that was a little bit more problematic. It wasn't known as a mining country, but that's changing dramatically. And you can see that with news from our neighbors to the north at Filo and Jose Maria. The government of San Juan in Argentina and the federal government in Argentina are both promoting mining and see mining as a great potential driver to improve their economy going forward in the future. So it's a very, very good part of the planet to be exploring copper in right now in a very active area. And we're actively drilling with 4 rigs to expand that resource base that we already have. As I mentioned, we're a company that has successfully drilled out projects, de-risked those, and sold them to a major mining company. Our example of our first company, Antares, in the Akira project. We have twin companies right now. Regula's focusing on a really interesting copper gold project in northern Peru called Antacore, and Aldebaran that we'll talk about today at the Altar project in central Argentina. This is just reminds us where the location is. So we're one of 5 major undeveloped copper porphyry systems right along the crest of the Andes in western San Juan province up against the Chilean border. In the far north, we have Jose Maria, which was recently purchased by Lundin Mining for 650 million Canadian. And of course, the Filo del Sol project, where we're seeing fantastic results come out of that project and drawing a lot of attention in the news and with an appropriate market cap associated with that company right now. And then we're one of 3 deposits in the southwest corner of the province, tucked between McEwen's Los Azules project to our north and Glencore's El Pachon project to our south, and we can see where the Altar project sits. As with many porphyry copper districts, we refer to the Altar deposit as if it were one deposit, but it's really a cluster of porphyry centers with the known mineralization that we've defined and published to date coming from the Altar Central and Altar East deposits on the right-hand side of this diagram. And then much of our focus in the past this past drill campaign that's ongoing right now is in the QDM radio. At QDM, we have a small gold resource defined on the surface, but the emerging radio copper gold system is not currently included in the resource. And the focus of our drilling this year is really to get enough drilling into that system to determine the size and the overall character, to update the resource towards the end of the year and see what we're looking at. So 3 major copper gold systems defined to date, 2 of which report a resource, 1 which has an emerging resource on it, and a small but perhaps with room to grow QDM gold deposit on the surface. Undoubtedly, there will be other centers as we continue to explore in the system. I mentioned that we do have a resource out. This is important to note. Sometimes in a story that's driven at the moment by exploration results like ourselves, you focus on those exploration results and what they mean, and it's easy to kind of overlook what we already have in hand. So this deposit is, we have a measured and indicated resource at Altar Central and Altar East, constrained by the conceptual pit we see on this diagram, of approximately 1.2 billion tons at a 0.5 copper equivalent. With an additional amount of inferred resources at a similar grade of almost 200 million tons. So nearly a 1.4 billion ton ore body falling into one pit, 2 centers, but falling into one conceptual pit. And then off on the left-hand side of the diagram, we see the QDM radio zone, where we have a number of holes that followed up from the shallow gold resource that sits on the surface, encountered additional copper gold mineralization at depth. When we put this resource out last year, we did not have enough drilling to define a resource at QDM radio in the deeper copper gold mineralization. But with the drilling that we're completing this year, I think by the end of this year we'll be in a position to update that resource and show what's there. So let's jump right into a summary of where we're at with this drilling program. The drilling program this year is the first more serious drill program that we have as Aldebaran as a company. I remind you that Aldebaran has the right to earn into an 80% in this project, in the Altar project, through a series of payments and work commitments to Sibanye-Stillwater. Sibanye-Stillwater owns 20% of the outstanding shares, and we have a major shareholder called Route 1 out of San Francisco that owns nearly 50%. So fairly tight share structure on the company. We're into the 3rd year of a 5-year period to earn into initial 60% on the project. And the first 2 years, we really set things up by understanding the geology and geophysics and setting of the deposit. And this is the first year that we're in a position to do a more significant drill campaign. The drill campaign this year was intended to be approximately 20,000 meters. We, as many of our neighbors, have encountered some difficulties on completing that drilling. There's just a boom in Argentina right now, and a real shortage of drill rigs and parts, and particularly drillers and experienced drillers that know what they're doing. So we've all been challenged a little bit to complete the amount of drilling that we have planned, but we are moving forward. To date, we've completed 13,500 meters of drilling. 4 holes have been reported, including 3 holes last week, which we'll talk about in more detail now. We have 5 holes that are complete with pending assays that will be coming out in the next number of weeks as we receive those drill results. And we currently have 4 holes in progress with the 4 diamond rigs we have. There's a 5th rig on site that's drilling water wells for early stage de-risking and definition of what the water situation on the project will look like. The focus of the drilling has really been, as I mentioned, in the radio QDM zone, and drilling to see what we have in that copper gold mineralization at depth. Several of the holes do pass through the known gold mineralization at surface, and we've had some pleasant surprises on those that we'll talk about as well. We currently plan to drill until approximately June 15, weather dependent. It's been holding in pretty well right now. It's getting cold in the evenings, but so far no major snowstorms. So we will drill as late into June as we possibly can to try to catch up on the drilling. There are 2 drill holes off in the Altar Central and in the septum between Altar East and Central, holes ALD 220 and 221. Those are the 2 holes that we'll complete over in that portion of the system this year, with the majority of the drilling, as I mentioned, focusing on QDM radio. Why are we focusing on QDM radio? This was a snapshot as we started this field season of the drill holes that we had completed. And we can see the upper zone, if we look at on this, if we look at the upper area that I'm highlighting in yellow right now, that's the QDM gold deposit. So a near surface Maracunga style stockwork disseminated gold dominant system. It's mostly sulfide and it averages about 1 gram of gold per ton. And so and it falls into an open pit geometry, open at depth. Currently hosts about 600,000 ounces of mineralization, and as we'll see, probably warrants some additional follow-up. But holes drilling beneath this were the holes that began to encounter this copper gold system that we can see defined by the hotter colors on the drill traces on this diagram. And a number of those holes have hit some very long runs of moderate grade, but within that zones of higher grade that we think might be able to pull a starter geometry for a mineable situation on the project as we move forward. So this is a close-up of the status of the drilling for this season. So as I mentioned, 4 holes have been reported to date. All of the drill holes that we've reported have encountered long runs of copper gold mineralization in the copper gold, the radio copper gold zone at depth. A couple of those have traversed the upper gold zone as well, with some interesting results in those. Most notably in hole 45, which we reported a few months ago, that had that nice high grade run. It looks like more of a feeder zone feeding that, and we're following up on that, and we'll have news soon on what that might materialize as going forward. The drilling to date, the hole that's reported is 43 that I'm highlighting in yellow right now on this. We also have hole 47 completed, which we can see also highlighted in yellow right here. This is completed, waiting final assays to be able to report that. And then last week we reported 3 holes. So we reported hole 45. Let's say learn how to 45 collared right here and drilling in this direction. 44 collared right here and drilling in this direction. And 46 collared right here and drilling in this direction. And as I mentioned, all of these holes have encountered very significant mineralization, with holes 43 and 45 reporting grades more typical of the average grades we see in the bulked out systems within the QDM radio altar system overall, and with intermediate runs within those of higher grades, 0.6, 0.7 and above on those. On the drilling reported to date, we have not reported significant runs of the +1% that we've seen in some of the previous drilling, but we anticipate as we continue to drill, we will encounter those type of grades as we move forward. Let me run this. We'll pull this stuff back out, and then let's focus on where the holes are that are currently active. So, we'll mention first. I'll mention that holes 44 and 46 are drilled on the southern margin of the system as we know it, and it looks like we're beginning to constrain mineralization to the south. So these 2 holes were drilled to define the southern margin of the system in this area. And it looks like they're starting to drop off. Our average grades over long runs are more in the 0.3 to 0.4 range. We're seeing the gold content drop out on this, and indications that we're beginning to move to the periphery of the system to the southwest. Whereas we remain very much open to the north and most other directions in the deposit. So the drill results that we've gotten from 43 and 45 farther north are more encouraging that we're seeing in 44 and 46. We can also see these extreme swings that we're seeing on these drill holes. In both cases, the holes did not terminate where we intended them to. We're experiencing with the drilling company that we're using and the conditions we're drilling under right now, that the bottoms of the holes, particularly when we reduce to the smaller diameter core, are tending to hook to the right pretty severely and float up, which is a bit unusual for this deposit. Results that we sometimes move notably from where we intended to be on the end of the holes. Despite that, hole 44 still terminated mineralization. So we're defining the margins on the south side, but we're adding significant volume to the system as we move forward. And then holes that are currently in progress are hole 48, drilled right here, drilling right back towards hole 34, which had some of our best grades on it. We'll cross the hole with that. We have hole 49 drilling across the system here, and hole 50 drilling across the system. So these three holes that are in progress right now, plus hole 47, which is completed with results, will be the next 4 holes to come, probably not all at once, but these will be the remaining 4 deep holes that we'll drill at the project over the course of the next few months. This is just an example of what the results came from hole 43, where we see a long run, 707 meters of 0.51. That's our average grade overall in the Altar East and Altar Central systems. And then within that, we see zones of higher grade. And we can see this is a significant extension from the additional drilling on this. So we've expanded the deposit to the east and not cut it off yet. When we look at the overall system right now, we can see the long runs of mineralization that we've seen, but on that southwest side in holes 44 and 46, our grade's dropping off and the gold content's dropping off and we lose bornite, indicative of us moving to the margins of the system, but with plenty of room to go to the north and northeast and northwest on the system as we drill forward. This is a 3D view through all of the drill holes in the system. It's because of our drill pattern, it's a little hard to show individual sections on this. We can see the 3 more recently reported drill holes, all with that hockey stick shape to them. As we reduce to end core on this, we're starting to see those float up and hook to the right, notably. We can see the upper gold system at the QDM gold system. And then we can also see the emerging part of the QDM or the radio copper gold system at depth. And so each hole we're drilling is continuing to intersect this zone. We're increasing the size of it. We would like to see higher grades in the subsequent holes as we move forward, but we are defining a large bulk system right now with very interesting copper gold grades in it overall. We go to the next slide. As I mentioned, the primary focus on this drilling was really to test that radio copper gold system at depth, where we didn't have enough drilling to tell what's the overall volume and nature of that mineralization is, and then subsequently be able to look at it to see if that fits into a mineable geometry as we move forward. But several of the holes that are drilled to test for that copper gold mineralization at depth cut through or near the existing QDM gold resource at depth. And this is where we've had a couple pleasant surprises in hole 45, particularly where we hit a high grade feeder zone, it looks like, with almost 15 meters of 19 grams of gold. We are following this hole up. We have 3 holes that are completed as 25 to 50 meter offsets in 3 different directions from this. Those holes have been completed, and we anticipate that we'll be in a position in a few weeks to put out a news release on those. And what we're trying to determine is did we just hit a raisin in the pudding here with these higher grades, or are we actually tightening up and seeing more of a high grade feeder zone that's feeding that more near surface overall 1 gram type gold deposit? And then as a consequence, we'll also be looking to see if we might be able to expand the known mineralization and see what that transition from the more disseminated bulk tonnage at the surface is to these higher grades that we see at depth. So we're looking very much forward to seeing the results from those 3 holes to go forward. It's not a primary focus of this project. The focus of the project is really on the large copper gold system that we have at Altar Central East and emerging at Radio. But this is a very interesting gold occurrence that sits right above the radio system. And if any of the radio system were to be open pit mineable, this would be effectively payable strip that's over the top of that, or perhaps an opportunity for a gold alone portion of the operation moving forward. As I mentioned, we have about 600,000 ounces of gold sitting within this shallow pit on the surface, and we can see QDM 45 with on this diagram right here, where we hit these higher grade zones as we've drilled down dip from the known mineralization on the system. So the additional 3 holes will be offsets in 3 different directions around 45, which will give us a lot more information on do we have a higher grade feeder zone, or if not, do we have the extension of this more low to moderate grade mineralization extending to depth, and perhaps we can increase this resource as we move forward. Important also to mention that there is still work to be done over on Central and East. We'll complete 2 holes, perhaps a 3rd hole, depending how quickly we terminate one of the holes that's underway right now. We may be able to sneak an additional hole in here. We're evaluating that and hoping that the weather doesn't close in on us. On these holes, we're testing concepts for extensions of mineralization or perhaps even new satellite zones for mineralization in this. Kevin Heather, our Chief Geologic Officer, has gone into that much more detail on videos that are available on our website for those of you that are interested. And just as a little bit of a preview on this, we've just in the past week received our final results for the deep looking 3D IP resistivity survey that we've been completing over the last 2 field seasons. We've gotten all the data in, and first glance on it, it's pretty exciting information and will help us tremendously to determine where we go for additional drilling in this area. We decided not to work that into the presentation today as it's just coming off the press, but we will likely have a news release out in the next few weeks that'll summarize those results and show some pretty interesting views of the deposit and what we can see with that survey completed and integrating that with all the other data sets we have right now. So it's pretty exciting information to watch for in the next few weeks as we summarize. This is a part of what Kevin presented and that's up on the website, just showing the known areas of mineralization we can see by the drill density, focusing on radio for this drill campaign. Extensions of drilling. We'll be drilling, 1 hole is active at hole 221 right now in this area, testing the septum between the 2 known areas of mineralization. And we've completed hole 220 over in this area to test for an extension to the southwest. And that's about what we'll be able to drill for new holes on this area. But as I mentioned, watch for this geophysical information that's coming up. It'll be very helpful for us to image these. And we've been holding off on a number of these peripheral targets until we have that data in hand. So that's really setting us up for next field season's campaign. So where are we at in the project overall? We acquired a project that had a lot of historical information. We spent the first 2 years of our earn-in period really collecting critical data and setting ourselves to understand the system better. That allowed us to recast the mineral resource last year. Completed that deep-looking 3D survey. It took us a little longer than we intended to, but we have all that data in hand right now, and we're looking forward to showing you that. As we've been discussing, drilling with 4 rigs right now. We'll probably finish a little over 15,000 meters of the anticipated 20,000. So a little bit short, but we're getting pretty close. And we'll be in a position with the new road in and the improving overall weather conditions in this part of the Andes that we anticipate we'll be able to start back up drilling in September this year. So we'll stop drilling mid to late June, weather permitting, and then we will get back in early this year in September and continue our drilling moving forward. And that should still put us in a position to do a mineral resource update. We think we'll have enough drilling with what we've completed now to be able to do that. We may try to sneak a couple holes in early next season and still try to stay on track for having that new resource by the end of Q4 of this year. So just a quick summary of the catalysts that are upcoming on the project. This really primarily over the next few months driven by drill results. We've seen 4 holes reported to date. We have an additional 9 or possibly 10 holes that are either completed with assays pending or in progress right now. So quite a significant amount of additional data to come on the project still. Those will come out in several batches over the next several months. The drilling is taking its time to be completed, and then the other limiting factor on this is really the turnaround in the assay labs. But they are improving right now. They seem to be catching up a little bit, so hopefully we'll be able to get to results a little more quickly as we move forward. As I mentioned, there are 3 holes that are testing for that extension of the high-grade gold intercept, so that will likely come out as one release with those 3 holes together to describe what we know about that area. Is there potential for a high-grade feeder to this, or are we looking at an overall low to moderate grade zone that extends to depth with local high-grade pods within it? We should have enough information to give a significantly better view of that portion of the project in the next few weeks. And then this deep looking 3D IP resistivity survey. I'm pretty excited about what we've seen in preliminary results on this, and we look forward to put that out. We will likely put that out as a separate news release discussing why we've done it, showing some of the images and what's come out of that, and very likely run a webinar where Kevin will walk people through the importance of this and what we see in it and what that tells us about additional areas that'll be primarily for next field season's drill campaign. As I mentioned, we won't have much of a break. We'll stop drilling sometime in June, and then we anticipate we'll be back into the camp in September and be able to start early next year. So a much shorter off season on the project this year than in the past, to be able to keep that information flow moving forward. And as of this point, we still believe that we'll be able to put out that updated resource by the end of Q4 2022. We will complete a little bit less drilling than we'd hoped to on the project this year, a little over 15,000 meters instead of the 20 to 25 that we'd had anticipated would be able to drill. But we've still kept the focus on QDM. Where we've done less drilling is over on Altar Central and Altar East, and we really wanted to wait for that deeper geophysics information to come in before we hit that anyway. So we believe we're still on track to be able to give a first look at what the radio copper gold system looks like on the west side of the district. Just as a bit of a reminder on where we sit compared to peers on this, as I mentioned, we have a very large resource, but we're not a resource that's at a PEA stage. So we're not seeing those project economics and some of the valuations you see as projects that are farther along the development chain than we are right now. So we currently, if we take a look at the reported copper equivalent pounds in the ground for the project on the left side of this diagram, we'll see that we're trading at less than a half a penny a pound with this recent market dip that we've all experienced as the markets have been a little bit choppy here. Our resource is very significant in size. We're over 15 billion pounds of copper equivalent just in the portion of the deposit that we have access, the 80% of the deposit that we can earn into. And our average grade is very similar to a number of other deposits that are our peers and our competitors on this. So when we see just personal thoughts on this, when we see market conditions like we're seeing right now, where we have a broad adjustment to the overall markets worldwide on this, a lot of times resource stocks, particularly early stage exploration stocks, get hit pretty hard on this. It doesn't make a lot of sense because we're really a project that's designed to define a project that could be developed into a mine quite a ways into the future on this, but we do get caught up into the wash. What this often creates is opportunities for investors that are looking for good long-term bets on this. So when we see these market dips, it's a great time to come in, accumulate shares in ourselves or any of a number of other copper or forward-looking commodities like lithium, copper, nickel. Right now, when things get beaten up, it's stressful for all of us as investors in the market or those that are actively exploring in the market. But it also creates some tremendous tremendous investment opportunities as you take a look around on this. So it's easy to go after the high flyer companies that have great valuations on this, but a lot of times the leverage is best when you catch some of the earlier stage stories like this, particularly when you already have a bird in hand with a large resource as we're moving forward. So keep an eye. Right now, I don't think we'll see these low prices that many of us are at for very long. There will likely be a sharp rebound, particularly as the COVID situation in China gets resolved and becomes less of a demand concern there. I think we'll see copper and other forward-facing commodities move rather quickly to the upside. So just as a recap on this, we're a story that has a large resource already in hand, aggressive drill program underway. We're testing for higher grade targets to increase the size and improve the quality of the project overall. In a very high profile location in San Juan right now. It's probably one of the most active areas for copper exploration worldwide at this moment, as evidenced by the difficulty to get rigs and good drillers. And more importantly, right now we have a compelling valuation that's a great time to come in as an entry point to the company. So thank you for your time. Once again, I remind you we'll be at booth 908 at the VRIC conference here over the next couple of days. But if you're not able to attend at that, please don't hesitate to contact us. There's a lot of information on our website, and we're always happy to talk to shareholders that like to kick ideas around with us and learn more about our project. So thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you so much, John. We're going to head into the Q&A portion of the event. So if you do have a question, feel free to submit them. We have a few here. But with John, with the delays in drilling, do you still anticipate that you'll be able to put out an updated resource estimate by late this year?
As I mentioned, we do. We were a little short on our drill meterage overall from what we anticipated we'd do, but where we didn't complete work was more on the east side and some of those new and peripheral targets. So we've completed most of the work that we wanted to at QDM. We're waiting results for more than half of the holes in that area. We've only seen 4 holes to date. We'll have another 7 or 8 holes that come out of that by the end of this field season. We will undoubtedly not have it closed off by any means at all, but I think we'll have enough that we'll be able to put out a first look at the project late next year. And with an early start, if we need to, we can sneak another critical hole or 2 in and still be able to meet that timeline.
Great, thank you. And given the issues with the drilling company, why don't you change to a different company to solve those problems?
Well, yeah, this is a question that we commonly get, and I see a lot of this on some of the chat sites and social media on this. I wish it were that easy. Every drill rig in Argentina is working right now, including rigs that have been mothballed for years, and the companies are just stressed to the max right now. So it's easy if you're looking at just one company like ourselves to think, boy, they're having some problems. And we chose in the release last week to indicate clearly what our challenges are on that, so people are aware of that. But it's not unique to us at all. Our peers up at Filo are using the same company and struggling with completion of holes and driller errors on theirs, as recently reported. And we don't have the ability to jump. There's not another company right now with rigs available for any of us to jump to. And it's not just specifically the company we're using. As we communicate with peers, everybody's facing similar challenges. So part of it is just rigs. Every rig that's out there is out there. There's supply chains issues about when we have broken parts. It's difficult to get replacement parts quickly on the rigs. And one of the things that's often overlooked is that when we expand so rapidly and have so many rigs running, a lot of times we have a shortage of experienced drillers, and that's really showing itself in some of the driller errors that we're seeing on the project moving forward. We're working to help the company do as well as they can. They have good intentions to do that, and we're beginning to look forward to next field season, which will start in September, to be in a better position that we can make the changes, the more fundamental changes between campaigns. It's very difficult to do it during campaign.
Okay. And with the new road, would it be possible for you to drill all year long?
Another good question on here. We, as for those of you that aren't familiar with this program, historically had a short field season from about effectively January to April. But this year we've gained access through new lower elevation roads. We no longer have to cross 2 high passes to get into the project area, and this was done partly by Pachón opening up a major road to Glencore opening up a major road to their Pachón project, and then another 14-kilometer extension we put off of that. It's dramatically improved our season. We're drilling now well beyond when we've drilled in the past. We still plan to take a break, but there is some discussion about if we'll be able to go forward. The projects up north, Filo and Jose Maria, plan to drill all year this year, and we're working closely with Los Azules, who are behind on their drill program, to see how long these can extend. But at this point, we do plan to take a short break on it and get back in September. But I think looking forward, we will probably move to an all-year program.
Okay. Great. Ken has a question here about slide 15. Is the bottom of the conceptual pit being constrained by the stripping economics or by the bottom extent of the resource block model?
It's constrained by the parameters we put in on the strip ratio and the cost to move material to get down to this point. The mineralization is very much open to depth. It's also approaching a maximum depth for conceptual pits. This pit is 800 or 900 meters deep in areas, and there are pits that exceed 1 kilometer in depth. But generally, when you model a system like this, you're not allowed to go beyond that depth as you move forward. But the mineralization is very much open to depth, and some of the grades are approaching grades that perhaps might allow bulk mineable tails underneath the system as we go forward. So there's a lot of room, and when we put out the geophysical information here in a few weeks, it'll be worth revisiting that question, because now we think we can image to depth a little bit better on where the system goes as we move forward.
All right, thank you. Another question here. Are you able to use the new Los Azules permanent road access? And do you have a plan showing its alignment with respect to the Altar location?
I don't have a one I can pull up quickly here, but there is one on a presentation that Kevin made in March of this year that was facilitated by Six as well. And it shows the new location on the road. It's not Los Azules, it's Pachon, Glencore Pachon, that put that road in. And it is a private road, but we do have access agreements, and we collaborate with Glencore on that. So we have access to use that road, and then our own extension from that up to the site. So now when we leave San Juan, the highest point on the access road to the project is the camp itself. So it's just a low elevation road all the way in. You may be referring to Los Azules has improved a road from the north side to get into their camp, and they're trying to do the same thing as to extend their system. That road is better than it has been in the past, but it's a much longer pathway for us. So the best access road for us remains the Pachon Road and into our project site, but we do have a secondary route via Los Azules. As an aside, Los Azules will probably be using our access road late in the season here because it's lower elevation for them as well.
Got it. Yeah, and all the previous webinar recordings are up on 6.com. So if you want to visit and rewatch one of those, feel free to. What is your current cash position, and will you need to complete a financing soon?
Another good question. As we've extended the season and waiting to get results out so people can see what the investment and the work that we've been doing is producing on this, our cash position had gotten a little bit low on this. But as part of the news release last week, probably one of the more important notes that's in there is that a number of our major shareholders, including ourselves as the management team, have elected to exercise warrants that were due in September of this year. These are 70-cent warrants, so they're about at market. And when we started doing this process, we were quite under market on that, but they've come in. But with that, we've put in an additional 2.5 million. So we're at about 2.5 million in cash right now, which will allow us to complete this field season and take our time and maybe get out of some of the turbulence of this market a little bit before we will need to do a financing to set ourselves up for the field season next year. But we hope to do so under more stable conditions in the next few months and with a lot more information on the table.
Great, thank you. Ben's asking, after the resource update by the end of this year, will you be looking out to put out a PEA in 2023? What would the timing be like for this?
We have not made a decision on that, partly because we need to see what we have in radio. So we want to see what that system looks like, and then we also want to evaluate what some of these additional targets are, whether we need to do one more field season of resource definition before we do that PEA, or whether we feel that due to market conditions or where we're at with exploration, an alternative would be at the end of this year, we make a decision to move to a PEA on what we have in hand, fully realizing there will be additional mineralization to come in. But we haven't made that decision yet. If we do make that determination at the end of this year with the new resource update, that we'd be in a position to do a PEA, a logical time for that to come out would be at the end of 2023.
Okay, great. Alex asking, are you planning additional met test work this year, including concentrate treatment options?
We're not planning additional test work ourselves. We do have the benefit of quite a bit of test work that was done by Stillwater, the previous operator on the project. So we have a fairly good idea, and much of our mineralization is porphyry style mineralization. So it's material that's fairly easy to make a general idea of what type of a concentrate we might make. What we are doing is we are interacting with groups a little bit more on the marketing end of concentrates to understand. We have a arsenic in the upper portions of some of the deposit. The radio deposit's very clean off on the west side. That's one of the attractions on that, is that we don't see the deleterious elements there. But in the upper portions of Altar East and Central, we do have some arsenic in those areas. But as we understand the system more now, we don't believe there are arsenic levels that will require on-site treatment of the concentrates prior to sending them off. We believe it's something that's solvable by blending of that material, either ourselves or with third-party blenders on that as we move forward. So, but that's the extent of really what we're looking at right now, is knowing enough about it to determine that when we do move to a PEA level on this, what type of capital we need to allocate to this on treating. But right now we believe that it's produce a concentrate on site and send that out. Keep in mind that portions of the deposit do offer the opportunity to leach on site, which would produce cathode to be a lower capex on site, and it would get around that arsenic issue. But we have to balance that about how much gold do we capture at the same time. So there's a lot of trade-off work to come forward, but we believe we have the data in hand we need on the metallurgical side to determine those or find those answers for what we're looking at now.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Is high inflation in Argentina driving up costs at the Altar project?
Okay, it's interesting. This is something we're seeing that worldwide right now. That you would think that we'd be in a boom right now with these metal, even with this slight drop in copper and gold prices right now. The major mining companies intuitively should be making tremendous amounts of money. But part of what's cooling the market off a little bit is a number of the producers are indicating that despite having relatively good metal prices right now, that their base costs, both operationally and particularly capex costs, are increasing very rapidly, which makes sense to all of us, and particularly with the sensitivity to fuel prices that many projects and operations have going forward. So in a global sense, the inflation and these increasing costs will affect us, because they'll affect the cost to build a mine eventually and to operate a mine going forward. But in a more day-to-day sense and exploration for us in Argentina, it's really not hitting us too badly right now. Keep in mind, Argentina has had a long history of high inflation for quite some the entire time I've worked there, for the last 20 or 30 years. And so we've averaged probably 50% inflation in Argentina for the last decade. And so we're accustomed to adjusting salaries and moving things around. And the way it works right now actually is that there are a series of different mechanisms that you can bring money in, and the exchange rates move as the inflation occurs. And in general, it's tended towards making it cheaper for us to work in Argentina right now. It's for base costs, anything with the exception of fuel right now, for food, labor, material costs, even drilling costs right now have a tendency to be going down despite the inflation.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, John, for taking us through the presentation and, of course, the live Q&A. And thanks, everyone, for joining. If you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out directly to John. The contact information is here on the slide. There's also more information, of course, on their website, aldebaranresources.com. But before I close things out, I'll just pass it back to you, John, if you have any final remarks. Okay, no, great. Thanks, everybody. Have patience. These rough markets are challenging for all of us, but there's nothing better right now than to have a large copper deposit in your company or be invested in those. These will be increasingly rare and increasingly sought after. And despite whatever's happening in the market right now, those fundamentals remain the same, and the major mining companies will be looking for these type assets to go forward. So a great time to cast your eyes around and look for opportunities in this down market. Place some bets on several different companies as they move forward, and get ready, because as I can't tell you when we'll come out of this current situation right now, but when we do, I think we'll see a sharp rebound in commodities in general, and particularly the more forward-looking commodities like copper, lithium, nickel. Great. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.